what Ban wanted to do is go to Colossians 1, but that's not what Justin's using in order to argue this. That's what I found funny.
That was really good. I appreciate you coming up and chiming in like you did, Henry, and same with you, Liberal. Appreciate you both.
I didn't say much. I didn't even mean to come up, actually, but I thought it was awesome. I didn't even mean to come up, but I thought it was awesome.
Yeah,
it's a great conversation. Really it's interesting because at least the way ancient you talk about it, Henry. It's like it seems to me sometimes so clear that the early church just didn't conceptualize the Trinity, Jesus and his relationship to divinity, the same way that the councils do. And even the councils are a progression, right? And I think that's like, yeah, go ahead.
The proof of that is the Council of Nicaea itself, because both sides, Arian and Athanasius, both say Jesus is God. So you can't just say, look, they said Jesus is God. This is Trinity. I'm like, no, dude, because the literal council that you're quoting is, they both say they're God. It's what does it mean, or what do they mean when you say Jesus is God?
And it evolves even through the councils, right? I mean, like the first council seems to be different than the other ones. Like so was it Arianism, the first council, the Nicene Council, the first?
My bad. Hold on. Give me 2 seconds, guys. Hold on. Yeah. See.
Well, tell you what, man, that was great.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to go take a shower to cool off from that one.
Yeah, it was all over the board, man. Like they went all over the board. And Henry, yeah, no, that was great. We just that was a great match.
Oh, hold on. Leave me alone. Sorry, I'm going in my room. All right, you were saying?
What were we saying? Something about Justin. We're talking about Justin and like the way he was talking to a Jewish person trying to explain it, right?
Yeah. So like what Justin's doing is he's trying to prove his point. And if you actually read the dialogue against Trifro is, so here's the thing: the two powers in heaven concept in Justin Martyr's mind, they're arguing the same thing. They are literally arguing the same thing. Go read if anyone reads the dialogue against Trifro, practically Trifro's depicting the second power as an agent. And then Justin Martyr goes on to say, yeah, he's another God, also called an angel. And I was like, oh my gosh, like they literally are agreeing. It's just like a huge circle. It's kind of funny because he's using his Christology to try to appeal to Jewish people is what he's doing. And that's why,
because the power of heaven, the second power in heaven is that's ancient too, but was it popular in explain it to me.
Yeah, so it's actually the oldest concept within Judaism is the two powers in heaven, because it dates all Philo does is this is very popular in regards to the Philo's Logos doctrine, and within the Jewish Targums they identify the angel of the Lord as Metatron. Metatron is a divine agent who bears God's name. They call him the little Adonai. And so this is something that was prominent and was well known in light of Jewish history, because they refer all the way back to Abraham and this angel being the one that's presenting himself to God, or presenting himself to Abraham as God. And so like they literally do this all the time. And what Trifro, or what happens in the 2nd century after the Bar Kokhba revolt against Rome, is that this two powers in heaven concept later becomes heresy because Christians adopt it. And we see this contention between Trifro and Justin Martyr, because once they start adopting this two powers in heaven argument to solidify the claim of Christianity, or Jesus being the Mashiach, or the Messiah, but the Savior, in light of the angel of the Lord, conflated with the angel of the Lord, the Jews didn't like that. And so they deemed it heresy. And then later on, once you get into Maimonides in the Middle Ages, that you have a new revamp of what the 13 principles of faith is for Judaism, where now in Jewish customs under the Rambam, God is immutable, God is without passions, God is without parts, and all this other stuff. And they completely deviate from the earlier tradition.
It's super interesting.
Yeah.
One of the things I also wanted to bring up, because this is also, he was mentioning at the end, sort of he got like a couple digs in after the bell rang, I feel like.
Yeah.
But it was like
he needed it.
The thing is, it's like the sort of like a different Jesus thing. It's just like, I want to just harp on like our most holy texts of Jesus, if you're not LDS, are going to be the four gospels, right? And there's nothing inside the four gospels where we talk about Jesus that Mormons do not agree with. Like it's the same Jesus. Like, did your Jesus walk on water? Oh yeah, he did. That's interesting. That's crazy. That's the same Jesus that I have. Like, did your Jesus raise the dead? Like, yeah, that's the same Jesus. Like every single, did he turn the water into wine? Oh my gosh. Like all the miracles, everything that's there, it's the same person. And like, if God had wanted to be really explicit about the ontology of where Jesus is from, that could have been all he talked about on the Sermon on the Mount, but he didn't. He talked about how to be good to your fellow being.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the understanding within Jewish customs too. Like you'll see and read rabbis that literally disagree with each other. Like for instance, like Genesis 18, the chapter that Justin Martyr was quoting. If you read the commentary, and this is kind of controversial within Judaism, and the Rambam had a real big issue with this because in the very beginning, in verse 1 of Genesis 18, it appears that God himself is the one that's appearing to Abraham. It says Yahweh or Yahovah or whatever. And so what Rashi understands is that Rashi defines this as a messenger that bears God's name, working off of Exodus 23, right? He's trying to work off that tradition. And he believes this is a real event. Well, the Rambam has a real big issue with God being anthropomorphic because in his 13 principles of faith, God is immaterial. He kind of adopts an Aristotelian philosophy. And so the Rambam later goes on and says that this whole narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah, this was all either a vision or a dream. None of this actually happened. It's allegorical. So like you have an issue with this understanding of the being of God and how he operates. And that's where you see the shift within Judaism. Like Benjamin Sommer has a book called God's Bodies, and he talks about how all the early rabbinic literature depict God in an anthropomorphic way in shape, that he has tangible features. And you don't see, and Benjamin Sommer talks about how it's not until you get to Maimonides in the Middle Ages where he presents his Mishnah Torah, which is the second Torah, his interpretation. He basically, what it is that he went through all the Talmudic literature and he formed the Mishnah Torah, and he says, okay, now no one has to study the Mishnah Torah or no one has to study the Talmud anymore. I did it for you. Just study the Mishnah Torah that I put together. And he reconstructed Judaism. And that's why some people refer to him as the rabbi that destroyed Judaism.
That's
so
Maimonides?
really interesting.
Or no,
yeah,
who was that? Maimonides.
Yeah. Or the short, there's an acronym he's referred to by as the Rambam. So Rambam.
Okay.
And
when was he?
It's weird. He's like around the 13th century.
13th century. Well, so that's kind of new. But when you guys were talking and you were specifically talking about sort of just the conception of like Neoplatonism, which is kind of a regurgitation of this kind of 1,000-year-old tradition. Really, I mean, by that time it's like 500s AD, and Plato is 500 BC. I mean, those are rough. That's not exactly right. I think Plato's
around
like 400.
He's 5th century, so like 400 something. Yeah, between
yeah. So, but I'm just roughly speaking, and so it's kind of like this interesting. You have that Neoplatonism like enter into the kind of the zeitgeist, and it becomes sort of the way that Christians have to understand Christianity. But then, like, let's say 200 years after that, or 300 years, like another area that is being influenced by Christianity and Judaism, there is a new religion that's formed. That's like, we need to be even more radical than Christianity, which is kind of mixing these three persons into this like Neoplatonic conception of God. And we need to go back to this like very, very like which I'm talking about, like Islam is like, sort of like a return to something that's a little bit more pure, in terms of its Platonism, I think. I mean, like, you could argue that maybe that's not exactly right, but
wait, you said you use Islam in reference to the purity of Platonism? Because I think so. Because like here's the issue. I think it's kind of funny that Aristotle was a student of Plato, because they have two completely different aspects of God, right? Like Plato has this demiurge where the transcendent God doesn't interact. He's like Plato's transcendent God is still like immaterial, but this transcendent God makes this second God, who's like a contractor God, the transcendent God is revered as the archetype within Platonic thought, and he has a contractor God, and this contractor God is the one that deals with matter, with the material world. And that's the one that's referenced as God all the time in the scriptures, because what he presented was an issue to Aristotle, because Aristotle had an issue with Plato's concept of ex materia, or creation from pre-existing eternal matter. Aristotle insisted that had to be wrong, because then that would imply that God is within time. And so Aristotle argued with Plato in regards to his philosophy, where he argued that God had to be immaterial and immutable in all these instances in order for him to actually be transcendent. So
got you. So it's actually the Trinitarian. So the Trinitarian concept is actually more aligned with Aristotelian thinking.
Yeah. So because the main issue is that it's Platonic and Aristotelian in a way, because the transcendent God just does not interact with the material world. It's always his second God that he has, his contractor deity, and Aristotle didn't like that at all. So Aristotle tried to make it in his articulation of his philosophy, God had to be pure intellect and pure being, immaterial, for it to function correctly. But what's funny is that the Jews, they don't specifically in the first century, they don't have that Aristotelian articulation of things. So like, for example, like Philo on creation, there's a quote in a passage where he says this. He says, "For as nothing is generated out of nothing, so neither can anything which exists be destroyed as to become non-existent." And what I argue is that if anyone understands physics at all, this sounds exactly like the law of conservation of energy. Do you know what that is, Barely Liberal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, for instance, like what I just read, tell me that this does not sound like the law of conservation of energy.
Can you read it one more time with that as
the Philo? Yeah. I'll read it real quick. With Philo says this: "For as nothing is generated out of nothing, so nothing comes, or something doesn't come from nothing, neither can anything which exists be destroyed as to become non-existent." And the law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another, meaning total energy is an isolated system which remains constant. And here's a second quote from Philo, where he says, "Being made us, i.e. elements, when you were born, you will again be dissolved into us, elements, when you come to die. For it is not the nature of anything to be destroyed so as to become non-existent, but the end brings it back to those elements from which its beginnings come.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it reads a lot like that.
Yeah, 100%. So like my whole thing is that Aristotle didn't have that concept. Aristotle was like something came from nothing. Plato kind of aligns a lot more with what we understand in physics, where all existing material matter in the universe, which is 5% of everything that's observable in the universe, is consisted of atoms. We're consisted of atoms. Every material object is consisted of atoms. It's just formed in a different way. And the one thing that we know from physics is that, as far as we know, going all the way back to the Big Bang, energy, those atoms that make up the material mass in our universe, always existed. It can neither be destroyed nor created. So like for me, Plato lines up more with Aristotle's, or more with physics than Aristotle does, or Philo as well. My bad. Philo is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Philo. So Philo was Jewish Alexandria. Philo of Alexandria.
He was a Jewish philosopher from Alexandria, Egypt, which is kind of like the hub for like Hellenism, like Hellenistic thought during that time. Which the Gospels indicate that Jesus would have been raised in Egypt for a time of his life. As a matter of fact, within biblical scholarship, they argue that Jesus would have learned a lot of his mysticism from Egypt, because the Gospels indicate that he fled from Herod because he had a mandate for the unalivement of babies, and so him and Mary and Joseph fled to Egypt until Herod died.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Egypt had such a strong presence in both Christianity and Jewish thought. I mean, because Egypt is also like so ancient. I mean, even like the pyramids are 2,000 years BC. Is that right? Something like that.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely
it was like
insane,
when I went to Rome. Yeah, when I went to Rome, they collected Egyptian artifacts as if it was like Romans. You know what I mean? It was literally 2,000 years before that this civilization had been there, and they like didn't know. They just, it was like this. It was like a simple, like when you think about God as power and majesty, like you see that God had residency. Like through these civilizations. And it's striking that the God of power and mercy that we know actually comes from like a subsidiary, like this Canaanite area that's kind of like the backwoods of both the Roman Empire and Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yeah, for real. And then real quick, I'm going to answer Elle's question in the comments. So, like Elle, the answer that I give creedal Christians in regards to when they say, "But you Mormons use philosophy too," it's fine, because what I'm going to allude to is that we allude to the more first century philosophical framework that Jews used, which was a Middle Platonic form that Philo, that I just articulated just now, that Philo understood, which aligns more with the understanding of physics today than Aristotle, who Aristotle is, or not Aristotle, Athanasius, who was a product of Aristotelian thought. Who was also from Alexandria, Egypt. So if they have an issue with Philo, who's from Alexandria, they got to simultaneously apply the same standard from the person who formulated the Trinity and their canon, who is from Alexandria, Egypt as well.
I don't see what the problem, like, I don't see what I've heard people say that like we don't use philosophy or we do use philosophy. It's like the point is that the way that the Trinitarian ideology is formatted is through philosophical analysis. I mean, they don't claim revelation, right? I think that's the big difference. There's like, for us, there's like a lot of stuff that we don't understand. We can philosophize about it all day as lay members, but like it's not being taught in general conference, because that's not what God thinks is critical to be taught, right? That's not like that's something that can be fun and interesting for people that are philosophically minded, but it's not like part of our religious tradition in the way that the Trinity is.
Yeah, because like here's my point when I bring this up to people is that the Catholicism openly admits their involvement with using philosophy in order to construct their dogmas, because they always allude to, for instance, what's his name, Thomas Aquinas, who is literally one of the leading philosophers within the saints within the early Catholic Church, and they allude to him all the time for answers. And what I tell Protestants that like to say, like, oh, you guys are indulgent in philosophy of man, I was like, well, you know what? Here's the thing. Athanasius and Thomas Aquinas, all these people that helped construct the foundations of your belief and what you deem as canon were philosophers. So no offense, but you are indirectly involving yourself with philosophy of the early church. The historical question is, why did restorationists accept new philosophy and other didn't? Wait, the real question is why did restorationists accept new philosophy and others? What do you mean new philosophy, Extractor? Like, and you say restorationists, so like I'm assuming that you're not alluding solely to the LDS Church, but like other restoration movements. What do you mean new philosophy? Because the Latter-day Saint Church alludes back to Platonic philosophy of Philo's time, Middle Platonic philosophy. I'm not going to say they openly admit that, but like we take the concept of divine investiture within the church and openly state that that's the framework that's understood in regards to understanding Jesus's relationship with the Father.
But being a good philosopher is not why you become a member of the 70,
exactly,
or a member of the Quorum of the 12. Like and the church is ultimately led by these men, and they, there's philosophers and thinkers and some of them are influential to the brethren, and some of them aren't. But the point is that the church itself is led by a spiritually defined body, like men that are, by the culture and by the peers esteemed to be spiritual men, and not philosophers, right? I think that to me is like the difference between other types of Christianity. Yeah, that I'm aware of.
No, I can agree with that. Restorationists reject creeds and its philosophy. Yeah. Because even if correct me if I'm wrong, but don't JWs technically claim to be like a restorationist, technically, like sect?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So like even when I understand JW's philosophy, they do a good job of trying to get back to first century understandings to a degree. I don't think they understand. I think they don't understand the conceptualization in regards to what God meant anciently. But what I do understand within their philosophy, within their attempt to claim to be a restorationist, is the fact that they want to at least understand the accuracy when it comes to the translations on the basis of its historical context. I don't think they completely adopt the philosophy, but they at least allude to it in light of translation.
Yeah, and I think that that it's true that restoration, because so this is what was coming up for me when I was bringing up this idea of Islam as being like a more pure version of the Trinitarian councils, because it's like we got to get to this pure, simple, like divine simplicity. Like that is like one-upped. The Trinitarian version of it is one-upped by the Islamic version. Right. And it's kind of like, and I think that the same way the restorationist is like one-upping Protestantism and saying like, we got to go even further back to the beginnings of the church and look at the way that they're talking about it, which like, I don't know that much about it because I think of like the LDS church just kind of being like formed by revelation and stuff. But they're also like Sidney Rigdon is obviously like a biblical scholar before he joins with Joseph. And there is like a lot of impetus to kind of go back to the roots. So I kind of see there's like an analogy there.
No, for sure. And as a matter of fact, you're kind of correct. Well, not even kind of correct. You're correct in regards to Islam, in regards to them being the more pure example of like a pure being theology, or in regards to God, or this more. What was the phraseology that you just used a second ago in regards
like divine simplicity?
Yeah, with divine simplicity. Yeah, because they allude to the like a full adoptionist form of Aristotle's thought, where God is just pure intellect. And in Islam, there is one God, and he is solely pure intellect, and he's not shared amongst anything. Like nothing is alluded or is even in parallel or contrast to this immutable God of Islam. Now, what I will say is that the Rambam, Maimonides, who I mentioned earlier, he grew up in Spain, or he was born, I think, around Spain or that area, where he was surrounded by and lived within a Islamic empire, who he himself, being a Jew, had to pretend to be Islamic, so he wasn't unalived. I think his philosophy, when it comes to the 13 principles of faith for Judaism, rubbed off. I think Islam's philosophy rubbed off on him, because that's where you start getting this concept of God being immaterial, unknowable, immutable, and all these things within his 13 principles of faith that he articulates. And he starts reading through the Talmud and the Torah, and starts implying these opinions and commentary of how some things are allegorical in regards to the physical attributes of God being presented in the Old Testament. So I think Islam kind of rubbed off on the Rambam.
Yeah. It's cool. It's interesting. I have two things to say about that. One, really quick, just going back to our LDS roots, because I did family history, and I found out that my great ancestor is Charles Martel, who was the one that defeated the Moorish invasion of Europe in the 800s before Charlemagne was his grandson. So me and my kids were like, my kid Gemma was like telling the waitress, like, did you know that we're related to Charles Martel? And the waitress was like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's quite funny, because like the majority of people in the States, dude, are so naive when it comes to understanding history of like just the world. You know what I mean? In general, it's quite funny. Like I used to be one of those people that used to diss on like history class in high school, and now I'm like a history buff.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to share was like I was on my TikTok friend's live today, and he's Islamic, but he's a Sufi Islam, and so he was talking about Sufi, like a mystic tradition inside Islam.
Okay. I didn't even know that. I didn't know that was a sect.
Yeah. Sufi is like they're like SUFI.
Okay, Sufi. Okay,
Sufi. Right. Like there's like some famous poets that are Sufi. It's definitely worth reading their literature and stuff. It's really beautiful, and it's and it's talking about kind of manifest, like the world that is manifest from, like, for them, God, like, who is this sort of, at least in the Sufi tradition, is sort of like the ground of all being. But I was arguing with him. Well, not arguing necessarily, but I was putting my perspective on, which is like, yeah, I agree that there's a ground of being. Like for me, intelligence is synonymous in a certain sense with consciousness, which would be kind of like the ground of being. But there's also the emanation of power and majesty that is the God that I worship, right? That is like the Alpha, like, which you could say like the beginning, but it's also the Omega. It's like, what do we aim towards? What are we trying to be like? And so I was telling him, like, it's not just the transcendence of the fact that there is this kind of ground of being that permeates all existence and all phenomenal experience, but there's also like something that we're trying to be. And that thing is the Omega that we're all aiming towards, which to me is Christ and his God and the Father.
Yeah, no, I agree. Oh, right. Someone's calling my name. All right. Yeah, no, that's it's very interesting. I'm looking kind of a little bit into it right now. Kind of just a brief summary of what it is. Oh, Rumi. No way. Rumi was a Sufi?
Yeah.
That's crazy. He's an insane poet, popular poet.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
Crazy. All right. Nice. I'll have to look more into this so I can understand that. I never heard of the Sufi sect of Islam. It's crazy. I'm pretty sure that the Sunnis probably say that they're not Muslim or something. I'm pretty sure that they would probably say something like that.
Yeah.
It's because I think some of them like refer to like the Shias as not being truly like true Muslims because they deny the companions of Muhammad.
Yeah. No, it's nuts. It's a lot of boundary making over there.
Yeah, that's crazy. Dang.
At least our boundaries are exmo, homo, what's a true blue Mormon?
Oh, Paris is here. Hey, Paris. I think this is a Protestant friend of ours that we've had join a couple of times. I think it's the same person.
Yeah. There's also there's someone in the comments saying heresy.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. False God, false doctrine. I guarantee you, like most of those people though, like won't come up and like actually debate the concepts. And I feel bad, dude, because I'll be like making videos sometimes so I can post, and like people will be like, "There's someone like doubling up on like a letter saying," I'm like, I'm making videos right now. No, you're good, Paris. It was just a shot in the dark. I didn't know if you were busy. But yeah, dude, it's kind of crazy. I actually, frick, I said I came to come get my stuff. I need to grab it and start heading to the office. Or actually, no, never mind. I can do it here because they just left. Cool. Yeah. Hopefully I can get, well, once I get the recording of this live, I'm definitely going to go to the part where a husband and wife are one being. I'm gonna do what
classic. That's new Trinitarian type doctrine I've never heard of before.
Yeah. Sounds good, Paris. No, of course, you're always welcome. But yeah, no, because like that, man, I really wanted to bust out laughing like loud. I know I giggled for a little bit there, but like
dying,
dude, I was like, hold on, because he started getting into the concept to where he wouldn't say a man and a woman were separate beings. He started using the language of distinct persons. I'm like, oh my, come on, dude. No way. Like, wait, so a husband and wife aren't two separate beings?
Yeah, I've never heard that Trinitarian concept before. That was new to me.
Well, so I hear Trinitarians kind of like go there sometimes, but they always realize that that's probably not a good analogy or an example to go to, because they try to go there because the same word in Hebrew, echad, in regards to understanding the unity and oneness, because echad is used for like they become one. What was it that husband and wife will like marry and whatever, and they become one? The same word is used there as echad, as it's used in the Shema, where it says, "Oh, hear, oh ye Israel, the Lord our God is one." Echad, the same word is used for that. And so once they realize that that's not a good example, because you wouldn't say that a husband and a wife consist of one being, because they are echad, because they are one, they quickly kind of run away. Oh my gosh, hold on. One of my Jewish friends just kind of like, I need to text him, but he just slid up on my DM about something. Send me this. I've got to hear it.
Well, it's kind of, I don't know if it's karma or what, but the truth is like the other night, someone asked me what God was, and I said, because I think it was Ozark Papist. He was like pinning me on what my definition of God was, and I said, okay, God is because I was also explaining from my point of view how I understand the Mormon conception of God as being sort of akin to the Father, also akin to the Godhead, and also akin to the Divine Council, maybe. And so I was explaining that, and I said God is a being instead of saying God is a title, which is kind of like the correct move. So then I was like defending God as a being, including like separate beings. So no different than this guy that's saying like man and woman combined make one being. So I was basically defending that. I don't know why. I just kind of got myself into that shoe hole. And the move I made was, how like your consciousness works in your left and right hemisphere. Right? If you split your corpus callosum, your right hemisphere has different wants and needs and likes things that your left hemisphere doesn't. Like you could have, in the most extreme case, a right hemisphere hand, like which would be your left hand, putting on a jacket, and meanwhile the left hemisphere taking it off at the same time, because they're not speaking together. They're not one consciousness anymore. They're back to being two different individual consciousnesses. So I was arguing that you can actually make beings out of multiple beings through like this corpus callosum in that case, or whatever. But anyways, I'm just going to leave it like that. You guys can comment on it.
Sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, I understand the consciousness part and the arguments on that.
I don't know if it's the right way to argue our conception of God, though.
Yeah, hold on.
I really like the power and majesty. What was the other thing you said? Power, majesty?
So I said that Elohim anciently, and I've actually talked about this with my Jewish friend that I'm messaging right now. Elohim is used in regards to, there's attributes attributed to the word Elohim, God, right? And what it's used to identify is something that's supernatural, is really what Elohim is, and it's conflated with divinity. So Rashi talks about how Moses had power and majesty over Pharaoh, which made him God over Pharaoh. And the reason why he had power and majesty was because he was bestowed with authority and power from the God, or the God of Israel, to do so. And so in the understanding of Jewish thought, anyone who has power or majesty have divine characteristics, and they can be called God because of that. Not that they are the God, but that they are a power, or that they are a judge because they have certain power and dominion over people. So this is the proper understanding in order to understand the ancient worldview on why Moses is called God. Spirits are literally referred to as a part of God in the Tanya. And so that's why they're referred to as God, because they're like an eternal thing. Spirits aren't created in Jewish thought; they're eternal. And so if eternality is a attribute of God, so they are called, or divinity, so they are called Elohim. That's why Samuel's spirit was called Elohim. So power, majesty, and divinity are practically the categories. If anyone fits these categories, or that have any attributes that can be attributed to the God of Israel, they are, in their eyes, divine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's how it's used.
Power, majesty, and divinity.
Yeah, power, majesty, divinity. Okay, so let me finish sending this real quick, because we're not really want to switch pretty much.
Yeah, so the other wild thing I was arguing the other day was that like capital markets and capitalism point to God in a certain way, because they are showing like actual real power in the world in a certain sense. And everyone thought it was a wild argument. And I actually kind of do too, now that I'm saying it out loud again.
In regards to what?
I think that the power that exists in capital markets, like large accumulations of capital.
Oh, yeah.
Is a relationship that God has to the world.
Capital markets. Is it because of the power that a capital market like has?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. No, that still would be technically true. Yeah. It would be a very kind of like esoteric way of looking at it, but no, technically that would still be true in light of what Jesus even says, because like Caesar is referred to as God, right? Like the Emperor Caesar, or the King Caesar, whatever the heck it was. And the reason why he alludes to saying to the 12 and the Pharisees, like, give unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's, is because that was a capital market. Like Caesar had power, and the whole reason why the Jews were deemed as an exile, living amongst the Romans in exile, was because of the power of Caesar.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like, it's also interesting, and I'm getting way off here now. So Tyler, you can write me in. But like I'm liberal, right? And I think Henry, you were conservative. But one thing that I disagree with in terms of like liberal critiques of basically the structures that we exist within is this kind of like inability to see power as anything but a negative, oppressive structure that is here to kind of like destroy you, or like, you know what I mean? And I think that like it takes away from like the power that exists that we have in institutions, we have in capital markets, we have in churches, we have in states, we have in all these things, like tremendous amounts of power, right? And I think that we mistake the good that they are bringing, like, because they are like, I think, a small, imperfect version of the kingdom of heaven or of God.
Yeah, I understand, because like that kind of goes into the whole like socialist ideology, where like inherently, if you had a structure like that, inherently it would be good, but only in light of a kingdom where God is running it, where there's no abuse of power. You know what I mean? So like I get what you're saying. Were you also, hold on, were you alluding to the fact that all conservatives kind of view power that way?
Well, I was saying, like, in general, I think liberals are more skeptical of power, and
Yes.
conservatives are more appreciative of power, right? Like, whether you're like a conservative is going to be more likely to be supporting of the state, and liberals more likely to be critical of the state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I can see that, but I also see within the Conservative Party the limitations to a degree, right? Because there's still checks and balances within the Conservative Party. Because the way that I see it is that I also see within the Conservative Party the cutting of institutional programs that have power in certain sectors, and the minimization of power in certain aspects of the government. For instance, like there was
social
too
welfare
much power.
stuff.
Yeah, social welfare stuff, or like, for instance, I always use the Department of Education as an argument, because I think the Department of Education inherently was not a good for our country, and I think it's actually been a bad. And I think when you delegate the power back to the states to dictate education for each individual state that you live in, is actually giving less power to the government in that sense. You know what I mean? And that's something that the conservatives have always been like a big thing is. But I see the articulation on both sides.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, like small c conservatism is about state rights, about local governance, it's about limited government. I just mean, what I meant more is like, do you think of these institutions as inherently good or as inherently bad? And I guess, like, there are some, I mean, like, of course, like, liberals want a large state government or government to like do certain social, like things to make society more egalitarian, or to make it more free or equal for people that have been disprivileged before. But yeah, anyways, I think we're kind of off the rails. I didn't mean to go too far down a religious or a political thing.
Yeah, hold on, I'm just sending this message real quick.
They're interconnected though. Like, you think about the body politic and religious beliefs, especially Judeo-Christian beliefs, they're intertwined.
Yeah. Well, I just think, like, it's interesting to think of, how, I mean, like, how God works in the world, I assume, is through all available people that can hear his voice in all institutions, in all levels of power, sometimes successfully.
I'm reading a message right now. Pastor Jeff testifying of ex materia is wild. He's just giving this 3-minute long testimony of how God led him to basically ex materia without him actually saying it plainly. I got to go watch this video. Apparently, Hello Saints pastor is indirectly confessing that ex materia is true and not ex nihilo.
Makes sense. Interesting.
That's interesting. That's insane, dude. Oh, I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but for you guys that follow me on Instagram, I posted a clip from from yesterday. I was on Lions Live. There was this guy who came up and tried to say, basically he left a comment in the comment section that says F the Old Testament, it's allegorical. So I was like, well, Paul talks about Jesus being being testified in the Old Testament. It's like, are you just seeing that? Are you just saying if by saying that, because he was very vague? I was like, so by saying that, aren't you saying that Jesus is allegorical? Bro, this dude had an ultimate crash out. And so like he started listing examples of how like there was only concepts in the Old Testament that were allegorical. Like he alluded to like the Exodus and like the flood and stuff like that as being allegorical. And I was like, all right, sweet. Can you like provide me like any like historian or rabbi or and stuff like that? But because he was like his argument was that there are Talmudic scholars, which are rabbis. There are Talmudic scholars that say like there's these things are allegorical. So I was like, okay, like quote them. He's like, well, I'm not a professional apologist like you. I just don't know them off the top of my head. I was like, so if you're going to make a claim though, that like Talmudic scholars say these things are allegorical, and I already know Talmudic scholars for the most part are Jewish, then I want to see like your evidence. And so he goes on to quote Philo of Alexandria, who doesn't believe that they're allegorical, and another rabbi who doesn't believe the Exodus and the flood are allegorical. So, so I basically told him, I was like, so you believe these two, like this rabbi, not Philo, but the rabbi, that believes the Exodus is allegorical. He goes, yes. He goes, so I'm just clarifying, like this is what this rabbi says. He goes, no, not this specific rabbi. I was like, then why would you quote him? He goes, because you told me to quote Talmudic scholars that believe in allegoricalness of the Old Testament. Blah 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 blah. He started screaming and crashing out, and it was so funny. And I posted it on my story. It was hilarious. He got so mad.
You get a lot of people crash out, don't you, Henry?
Dude, bro, it's insane and hilarious. I even it's kind of funny because I put in a group chat that I'm in with some of these other guys, and I was like, I should change my name to Master Rage Baiter instead of Master Debater, because like this dude was crashing out hard. It was insane.
Henry, how do you
the greatest hits crash out compilation?
Yeah, I need to. I have another one where I was debating some other guy yesterday too, and he crashed out on 2 Kings 3 because he was trying to say that Moab retreated to their own land or back to their land. I was like, in order to justify that the God of Israel didn't lose to the God of the Moabites. And he's like, no, like read like verse 27. It says that Moab retreated to their land. I was like, literally the king of Moab is on the wall of his city. Like, where is he retreating to? Like, he's in his own land. Like, this makes no sense. And then he's like, then he started saying, like, you guys are literally like showing like Galatians 1:8 right now. You guys are false doctrine, false prophet, whatever. I was like, all right, run, whatever. And then he dropped. I was like, oh my gosh, dude. It was crazy.